If the whole gym laughs when you speak the truth, do you stay silent forever? The gym smelled like old rubber and new ambition. It was noisy in that forced way schools get when they try too hard to be inspiring, color-coded shirts, streamers, a borrowed speaker system that kept crackling under the principal's voice. It was Heritage Week, day 2. Today's theme, Legacy in Your Blood. Coach Calder strutted across the hardwood like he owned the air between bleachers, microphone in hand, whistle bouncing off his chest. He shouted over the low rumble of teen indifference. All right, champions, who's got a story? A legacy, something that runs in the family hero stuff. A few hands shot up. A girl claimed her aunt danced on Broadway. Another said her brother played semi-pro ball before blowing out his knee. There were scattered claps, mostly ironic. Noah stayed quiet. He didn't like these things. He liked symmetry, clean routines, the quiet rhythm of predictability. But then Mia leaned in, voice just above a whisper. You said your grandpa flew rescue missions. Right, say it. She wasn't pushing, not really, but she wasn't letting it go either. So Noah's hand rose slow, reluctant, like it belonged to someone braver. Calder noticed, Noah, haven't heard from you all year. What have you got? Son. There was a pause, just a beat, but the kind that feels longer than it is. My grandfather, Noah said. He was a rescue pilot, civilian. He flew into a wildfire in '94, saved 27 people. The room didn't go silent, not the right kind. It was that tight, coiled silence that smells like gasoline. Just waiting. Then someone snorted. Sure. Was this before or after he saved Hogwarts laughter? Scattered at first, then more joined in. Louder, faster. Calder grinned. 27 people. Huh. Was he in Star Wars too? Another voice from the back. Betty high-fived Yoda on the way out. Someone pantomimed flying a helicopter in a spiral. Made explosion sounds with their mouth. The gym echoed with it. That messy, sticky kind of laughter that clings. Calder raised a hand. Mock serious. All right. Let's not be mean. Big dreams come in small packages. But the damage was done. Noah didn't sit down right away. He just stood there, arms at his sides, jaw clenched. Like maybe if he stood still long enough, it wouldn't stick. Eventually, he walked back to his spot. Not quickly, not slow either. Just carefully. No one looked at him, not even Mia. Somewhere behind him, someone whispered. Next up, Sky Daddy. He didn't turn around. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. By second period, the wildfire had spread. Someone redrew a stick figure on the whiteboard outside Mr. Kellen's class aviator glasses, oversized helmet, cape made of math homework. Underneath, in shaky block letters, Captain Grandpa to the rescue by lunch. It was printed and taped to lockers. Some kids even pinned them to their backpacks, like badges, like laughter-needed uniforms. Noah didn't say anything. He moved slower than usual, but not in a way anyone would notice. Not unless you watched his eyes. He didn't eat lunch, just pushed cold carrots around the tray until they curled like antennae. At one point, a boy from the next table leaned over, dropped a juice box beside his hand. Need this. Flights are long. Someone else added a paper airplane made from a detention slip. Direct flight to delusion. Buckle up. Laughter again. Not cruel. Not loud. Just everywhere. Like humidity. Noah didn't respond. He didn't flinch. But he didn't blink much either. That afternoon, someone updated the stick figure this time with Harrison Ford's face taped over it. A photo from some old movie. Young and smug. Eyes narrowed like he saw right through the joke. Underneath Han Solo of the fire line, real life coming soon. Mia didn't look at him. She sat a row ahead in science and twisted her bracelet for 40 straight minutes. In the hallway between 6th and 7th, Coach Calder walked past, coffee in one hand, Bluetooth still in his ear, talking to someone. Kid's got imagination, he said, chuckling. Or maybe just a really lonely grandpa with a good printer. The teacher beside him laughed, low and tired. Confused the movies with the mirror. Happens. Calder nodded. Wouldn't be the first time a kid needed fiction more than facts. He didn't know Noah was behind the corner. Or maybe he did and didn't care. Noah stood still, back to the wall, holding his binder like it had something in it that mattered. That night, he couldn't focus on homework. His pencil moved but didn't mean anything. The words he wrote weren't answers. They were just weight. Eventually, he opened the drawer in his desk. Inside, folded into quarters, was an old piece of paper. It had crayon marks on it and a few faded numbers. Noah unfolded it slowly. It was a sketch, not a good one. A chopper flying over mountains, tiny stick people in the trees, and beneath it, in childish block letters, he flew into the fire. They all got out. He had drawn it when he was 9, maybe younger. After the night his grandfather told the story, or no, not told, mumbled, in the middle of the night, half asleep, half fevered. Noah remembered the way the words stuck to the ceiling fan's hum, how they hovered, and maybe, he realized now, he clung to those words harder than his grandfather ever had. Noah refolded the drawing, pressed it between the pages of his textbook like it was a pressed flower. Something fragile, something that used to bloom. He didn't know if it was true, but it had always felt true, and sometimes that was enough. Until now, the hallway outside the gym still held the echo of sneakers and mock laughter. Even when it was empty, it felt loud. Noah didn't go straight home. He walked the long way, past the edge of the staff parking lot, where the grass got too tall and no one bothered mowing, where the wind didn't carry voices. When he got back, the house was quiet. His mom was still at work. Dinner hadn't been cooked yet. The air smelled like cold coffee and something older, like old books or warm dust. Upstairs, he didn't turn on the light. He sat at the edge of his bed, backpack still on, and stared at his desk drawer. Eventually, he opened it. The box inside wasn't locked, just old. The kind of box people keep receipts or dried-out pens in. He opened it slowly, like it might talk back. Inside a map, folded so many times the creases had started to tear. A paper clip held a small note to the top corner, written in block letters. Noah recognized the handwriting. It was his. Don't lose this. He unfolded it. Each crease cracked like old joints. The map wasn't fancy. Just a printed terrain diagram of a stretch of mountain range somewhere in California. He didn't know the name, but in the lower right corner, someone, maybe him, maybe not, had drawn a red circle in pen, a shaky one, near a town called Cascade Point. He remembered now. The story had started there. Back when he was 9, maybe 10, his grandfather had fallen asleep on the couch. Feverish, Noah had been playing with toy helicopters on the rug. The news had been on some old segment about wildfire risk and pilot shortages. And in the thick of sleep talk and sweat, his grandfather had said, Cascade Point, July 94. We lost contact over the ridge. I went in anyway. That was all. He never said it again. Never repeated it. And when Noah brought it up the next morning, Ford just looked at him like he dreamt it. Maybe he had. But Noah remembered tracing the route on that very map, trying to guess which ridge he meant, drawing a shaky circle around it, believing completely, unquestioningly, that heroes didn't need to brag to be real. He ran a finger over the ink now. The red was faded, but still there, not smudged. At the bottom of the box was something else. A photo. It was black and white, cropped weirdly. Just a man's hands gloved gripping the side of a helicopter's open door. Behind him, smoke. You couldn't see his face. You couldn't prove it was anyone. But in the lower corner, barely visible in marker HF, 7/94. Noah stared at it for a long time. Not because he was sure, but because he wasn't. And sometimes not knowing hurt more than knowing you were wrong. Thursday smelled like stale gym towels and floor polish. The bleachers groaned under shifting feet as students settled in for athletic talent day. Or maybe just another excuse to kill an hour before lunch. Coach Calder was already in rare form, mic in one hand, grinning like a game show host who thought he was funny, the kind of smile that asked for applause and dared you not to give it. "All right, folks," he said, "who's ready to see some legendary bloodlines in action?" Noah was already shrinking into himself, seated near the edge of the first row. He didn't think his name would be called. He hoped it wouldn't. But Calder was already scanning the gym with mock surprise. And then he landed. "Noah," he boomed, voice stretched just enough to make it theatrical. "Care to show us a few rescue moves, I mean? 27 saves. That's got to leave something in the DNA." He tossed something across the court. It bounced, rolled, landed by Noah's shoes, a pair of dollar store aviator glasses. A few students started snickering. Calder smiled like he was just being playful. The air in the gym tightened. Noah didn't speak. He stood slowly, picked up the glasses, and walked to center court. His steps weren't confident, but they weren't weak either. Just steady, like someone walking into win. Calder clapped. "That's the spirit. All right, hero, how about a demo? A quick evac drag or a dramatic wave from the cockpit?" Laughter erupted again. Noah didn't answer. He knelt briefly, mimicked the start of a carry maneuver, a simple rescue hold he'd seen in old training videos. His posture was stiff, wrong. The floor was too slick. He slipped. Not a fall, just a stumble, a misstep, but enough. Calder cupped the mic. "Watch out, even the best pilots crash sometimes." The room exploded. It wasn't laughter anymore. It was something meaner, louder. Noah stood still, jaw locked. He pulled off the fake glasses, set them on the floor beside his foot like they were made of glass, then walked back to the bleachers. No one met his eyes, even Mia, somewhere near the back, looked down and fiddled with her shoelace. Later, in the locker room, someone had drawn a crude chalk outline near the bench where Noah usually sat. Inside it, a little paper airplane. Taped to the tile wall above it, "Rescue pilot down flight log fiction." No one claimed it. No one erased it. Noah changed in silence. Every movement a little smaller, a little tighter. In the hallway, students retold the moment like it was sketch comedy. Some exaggerated the fall. One kid reenacted it, flopping dramatically onto a bench. "Mayday, mayday." Noah walked past it all, like a shadow trying not to notice its shape. He didn't tell anyone what happened that day, not even at dinner. And yet, when he walked past his grandfather's coat hanging by the stairwell, he paused, reached for it, didn't touch it. But the gesture lingered, like maybe he wanted to ask and didn't know how. The house was quiet again, not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses against the walls, the kind that waits to see if someone will break it. Noah sat at the kitchen table, dinner growing cold in front of him. He was pushing peas into small spirals with the back of his fork, not really thinking, or maybe thinking too much. It was hard to tell the difference lately. Across the room, his grandfather leaned against the counter, arms folded, still in his work shirt. One sleeve was rolled, the other wasn't, like he'd started something and forgot to finish it. Ford didn't speak, not right away. He never did. The silence stretched until it felt like something in the air might snap. "Eventually," Noah whispered. They laughed. Ford didn't move. They made a chalk outline. That got him, not visibly, but the shift was there in his jaw, or maybe in the way he adjusted his weight. "Coach didn't stop it," Noah added. "Softer now." No one did. Ford walked to the cabinet, opened it slowly, pulled down an old tin box, the kind people use for nails or loose batteries. He set it on the table like it was heavier than it looked. He didn't say what was inside, just unlatched the lid. A folded flight map, yellowed, corners frayed. The red circle was still there. A photograph. Same as before: smoke, rotor blade, gloves. But this time, a second one beneath it, clearer. A man crouched beside a child wrapped in a thermal blanket. No names. No credits. Just a date scribbled on the back, Cascade Point 794. Noah stared. Ford slid something else onto the table. A pair of flight goggles. Cracked on one lens, the strap brittle. Noah didn't reach for them. He just looked. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" he asked. Ford took a breath. One of those slow, gravel-filled ones that feel like it's been waiting years to come out. "Because flying into a fire isn't the story," he said. "Coming back is." Noah blinked. "But if people don't believe it, what's the point?" Ford didn't answer right away. Then, "Low and certain, the wind doesn't lie. It carries the smoke, the heat, the sound of the ones you pull out. That's enough." They sat in silence after that. The kind of silence that didn't ask to be filled. Eventually, Noah folded the flight map again. Slower this time. As if it mattered now. As if it had always mattered. And he just hadn't been ready to believe it. He looked at the goggles. At the crack in the lens. Like maybe the truth had been staring through them the whole time, just fractured. "You still have the jacket?" he asked. Barely audible. Ford gave a small nod. "Top shelf, hall closet, smells like smoke and leather." Noah almost smiled. Almost. Friday came with an overcast sky and a quiet hallway. Noah walked to school like he was heading somewhere else entirely. He didn't say much over breakfast. He never did. But this time his silence was heavier. He didn't fidget, didn't pick at his food, just sat still, like something was building beneath the stillness. At school, athletic week limped toward its final act. Kids slouched in bleachers, faking enthusiasm. A handful of parents stood along the gym wall, arms crossed, phones ready to record anything remotely funny. Coach Calder, microphone already hot, stood in center court like a man auditioning for himself. Day 5. Folks, he boomed. And what better way to end the week than with a few surprise guests? He flipped his clipboard with a dramatic gesture, pretending to read. He didn't need to. The script was already in motion. "Let's see. Who's up first?" "Oh, local hero." Perhaps he smiled like the joke was already written. "Is the legendary Mr. Ford in the building?" The crowd stirred. A few heads turned. A couple kids started whispering, already primed to laugh. And then a crackle on the intercom. "Visitor at the front office." For Noah Ford, silence. Coach Calder hesitated just a flicker, but it was enough. Noah stood, not quickly, just like he'd already been halfway up. He walked across the gym. His shoes made soft, unremarkable sounds on the floor. But somehow, each step felt like a countdown. Then the gym doors opened. Harrison Ford didn't enter with a speech or a dramatic pause. He didn't meet the crowd with a nod or a smile. He just walked in, denim jacket, black flight case in one hand, the other shoved in a pocket. His face was unreadable, creased with years, but not with anger, just focus. He walked past the line of teachers, past the kids who'd already started to smirk and now didn't quite know what to do with their mouths. Ford didn't glance around, didn't blink. He stopped at center court, knelt, set the case down, unlatched it with 2 fingers, slow and precise, like it mattered, inside a plaque, worn wood, brass plate dulled with age. He lifted it carefully, turned it toward the crowd. The engraving caught the light. Harrison Ford, civilian air rescue pilot, 27 lives saved, Cascade Point. 1994, commendation, California Emergency Corps. No sound followed, not laughter, not clapping, just the gym breathing for the first time in days. Ford looked up, not at the students, not at the teachers, at Calder. Someone said the story sounded made up. He said, voice low, controlled. Calder swallowed, but said nothing. Ford's eyes didn't waver. "Truth doesn't need permission," he said. "It just needs someone willing to stand next to it." Then, finally, he turned, met Noah's eyes, gave him a single nod. No words, No applause. Just wait. And for the first time all week, Noah stood without shrinking. Coach Calder didn't say much after Ford left the gym. He pretended to go over his clipboard, nodded at a few kids, tossed out a half-hearted good hustle to someone who just stood up to stretch, but his hands didn't stop fidgeting. Later, after the bleachers emptied and the squeak of sneakers faded, he sat alone in his office. The lights were low. His whistle lay coiled on the desk beside a cold cup of coffee he didn't remember making. The door was closed. He kept it that way. 3 soft knocks broke the stillness. He didn't answer. The door opened anyway. Harrison Ford stepped in, no longer in the denim jacket, just a black button-down rolled at the sleeves. He didn't ask to sit, didn't clear his throat, just closed the door behind him and stood quietly in the center of the room. Calder stood awkwardly. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it," he began. The kids were laughing. It sounded like, "You didn't think he was lying," Ford said, voice low, firm. "You thought it might be true, and that scared you more." Calder froze. "I was joking," he said after a beat. "It got out of hand." Ford didn't blink. "Because you laughed first. That's not fair." "It's exactly fair." Ford walked once around the room. His fingers brushed over a photo on the wall, last year's track team. None of the kids smiling in the picture had been in the gym today. Or maybe they had. It didn't matter. "You made a space where truth became a performance," Ford said. "And you decided which stories deserved air." Calder sat back down, slowly, like gravity was heavier now. He didn't even defend himself. He muttered. He just stood there. Ford looked at him, not with pity, not with anger, just memory. "And you made a room out of that silence," he said, "then filled it with your voice. They stood in it together. That sentence. Like it was a hallway, neither of them knew how to exit." "I didn't know who he was," Calder said. "Didn't know who you were." Ford nodded. "Once, you don't need to know someone's past to respect their present." Calder glanced down. "I didn't think it mattered that much. It always matters." Ford turned toward the door, paused. "You like being the loudest man in the room," he said, hand resting on the knob. "That usually means you're the one listening the least." Then he left. No slamming, no drama, just the quiet click of a door being closed by someone who knew how to land without making a sound. And Calder. He sat there for a while. No clipboard, no coffee, just the whistle on the desk, and a silence that didn't go away. Monday came without ceremony. No assemblies, no more Spirit Week t-shirts, just hallway noise and overcooked cafeteria smells. Business as usual, but something had changed. Not everyone noticed it. In fact, almost no one did at first. The box was mounted quietly on the north hallway wall, tucked between the gym entrance and the old trophy case. No sign, no ribbon, no big reveal. Just there. Noah didn't see it until third period. He was carrying a bin of orange cones for Coach Denley busy work, probably cutting through the hallway like he always did. He wasn't looking for anything. He didn't expect anything to be different, but the way the morning sun caught the glass stopped him. The box was simple, clean, a shallow wooden frame, glass-fronted, inside a pair of old flight goggles, cracked across one lens. The strap frayed. Below them, a folded map creased so many times the paper had started to tear at the folds. In the lower corner, a small, red circle barely visible under the reflection. And between the two artifacts, like it had always belonged there, sat a photograph, the one Noah had seen before. The hands on the edge of the open chopper door, smoke behind them. The corner faded. The initials still there, HF, 794. A brass plate ran along the bottom of the frame. No title, no dramatic summary, just a sentence. You don't wear them to be seen. You wear them so the weight doesn't disappear. Noah didn't move, didn't reach out, didn't look around, just stared. It wasn't validation. Not exactly. It didn't erase the laughter, didn't rewrite what had already happened. But it was something behind him. The gym echoed faintly with the sound of bouncing basketballs and half-hearted warm-ups. But that all felt far away, like a different floor of a building he wasn't standing in anymore. He leaned in slightly, close enough to see the scratches on the glass, the dust caught in the corners. The way the light made the crack in the lens look like a lightning bolt frozen in time. He didn't notice Coach Calder until he was standing a few feet away. The man cleared his throat softly. "We put it up Friday," he said, voice lower than usual, almost normal. Noah didn't turn. Why Calder shifted felt like the kind of story that didn't need more words. There was a pause. Noah glanced sideways. Whose idea was it? Calder shrugged. Does it matter? Noah didn't answer. Just looked forward again. Took one more second, maybe two, then turned. Not dramatically, not like in the movies. Just turned and walked away. No applause, no crowd, just the sound of his sneakers against tile, the gym door opening, then closing behind him, and the box. It stayed where it was, silent, steady, real. Noah didn't stop at the display anymore. He didn't avoid it either. He just walked past it now, like you do with something that's no longer a question. Some days he glanced at it without turning his head. Other days he didn't look at all. But it was always there, and that mattered more than any of them had realized at the time. The flight goggles, the map, the photo, the brass plate that didn't ask to be believed, just to be seen. People didn't talk about it. Not much. No posters were made. No morning announcements. No articles in the school newsletter. But the hallway near the gym got a little quieter. No more drawings taped to lockers. No more paper airplanes in backpacks. And the chalk outline in the locker room. Someone scrubbed it clean. No one said who. At lunch, Noah still sat near the back. Still didn't say much. Mia had started sitting across from him again. She didn't offer an apology. He didn't ask for one. But she sat down. And that was enough. One day near the end of the week, he passed the display again. This time, someone else was standing in front of it. A second-grade girl, small with oversized glasses and a loose ponytail that swung when she tilted her head. She stood on tiptoe, peering into the glass like she was trying to see something between the reflections. Another girl beside her, probably a friend, whispered something Noah couldn't hear. The first girl pointed. "That's his grandpa," she said softly. "He's real." Noah paused mid-step. Not long. Just enough. He didn't turn around, didn't smile, but something in the way his shoulders eased, just a little, said it landed. That moment, that sentence. He walked on, didn't look back, didn't need to. He didn't know the girl's name, probably never would. She'd forget his in a year or two, maybe less. That's how schools work. That's how people work. But for a second, just one, someone else saw it. Not the plaque, not the gear, the space between the story and the silence. And they believed it, not because it was proven, but because it had stayed. That evening, Noah sat by the front window at home, sketch pad open in his lap, pencil moving slowly, not careful, but not rushed either. He didn't draw a helicopter this time, or fire, or even goggles. He drew a hallway, plain, familiar. On one side, a shadow box, glass catching the light, a photo, a map, a memory. On the other side, a boy walking past, head upright, not proud, not angry, just real. The porch creaked beneath their weight, the kind of sound that belonged more to memory than motion. Noah sat in the old wicker chair, a blanket half wrapped around his legs. The air was cool enough to notice, but not cold enough to mention. The sky had started bleeding orange into that deep, soft kind of blue that only shows up when no one's talking. Ford sat beside him. Same chair, same posture he always took, leaning slightly forward, Hands clasped, gaze aimed somewhere just above the tree line, like he could see a horizon no one else could. They hadn't spoken much since Friday, and they didn't need to. Eventually, Noah broke the quiet. They put your goggles on the wall. Ford nodded once. Which pair? The cracked ones. He smirked. Not big. Just enough. Figures. Only ones that knew what failure felt like. Noah looked down at his hands. It's not really failure if you come back. Ford glanced at him. Depends on who you ask. Silence again. Not heavy this time, just full. Then Noah asked, what does legacy mean? Ford didn't answer right away. He shifted in his chair, exhaled slowly through his nose. It means showing up, he said, even when it'd be easier to walk away. He let that hang, like it wasn't a quote, just something true. Noah nodded, eyes still on the porch floor. Inside in his room, the old map still sat on his desk. Next to it, the photo, the cracked goggles, and the drawing, the one he'd finished the night before. He hadn't shown it to anyone. It wasn't perfect. The lines were uneven. The hallway a little too narrow, but it felt right. It showed a boy walking, not toward glory, not away from shame, just on a forward, and across from him a glass case, not lit, not framed, just present. He'd written something beneath it, a sentence he wasn't sure he believed at first, but liked enough to keep. Some stories don't end. They just stop needing to be defended. Out on the porch, the wind picked up slightly, brushed past their sleeves. It carried the scent of pine and dry air, and something else. Something harder to name. Ford leaned back, hands behind his head. You know, he said, voice casual. I was scared the first time I flew into smoke. Noah turned to him, surprised. Really? Ford nodded. Didn't know if I'd find anyone. Or if I'd come back. What made you go? Ford looked at him then. Not with wisdom, just with history. You don't fly because you're fearless, he said. You fly because someone's still down there, waiting. Noah didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The porch light blinked on as the sky darkened, and for a long while neither of them moved. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.